They erased her name from the records. No photos, no gravestone, no family left to speak. But in 1974, in a forgotten corner of Europe, something unspeakable happened. The church called it a private matter. Others called it evil. What really occurred inside that crumbling house wasn't just exorcism. It was silence forced from the highest places. And someone finally broke the vow of secrecy. It began with a torn leather journal, found in a locked drawer of a retired bishop's estate. Pages stained with wax, notes written in code, and one word repeated again and again. Obadiah, to obey. But obey what? Or who? The deeper we read, the more it whispered. This exorcism wasn't just hidden. It was protected. The Vatican keeps a record of every sanctioned exorcism. But when journalists tried to trace this one, the file was gone. No request, no approval, no priest on record. Only a blank entry. Between two other cases in May 1974. A glitch or deliberate removal. Even insiders refused to speak. One archivist whispered, "That case didn't belong to us, it belonged to them." But who are they? Locals remember the girl. She screamed for days before they took her. Then nothing. Just candle smoke from broken windows. And a priest pale and shaking who never served again. They say the walls still carry her voice. But you must listen at night. In silence, with no light. Because whatever answered her cries didn't leave when the priests did. Buried in the back of that journal was a cassette tape. No label. Just static at first. Then a girl's voice, distorted, pleading. And another voice, deep, guttural, not human. A priest's voice cut in, "Leave her." Followed by silence. A long, unnatural silence. Then the tape stopped. But someone had written on the plastic, "Do not play after midnight." We did. Father M wasn't supposed to talk. He'd been moved to a monastery in the Alps. No visitors, no phones, no mass. Just snow and silence. When we finally reached him, he whispered, "They lied to all of us. It wasn't possession. It was an invitation." And when we asked who sent it, he hung up. The line stayed open. Breathing. Not every exorcism follows the rite. Some go older, deeper. Before Latin. Before Christ. One page in the journal bore symbols burned into the parchment. Anthropologists traced them to pre-Christian tombs. Not for casting demons out, but for calling them in. And in the margin, a note. Only those bound in faith can summon without being taken. But she wasn't bound in faith. She was just 16. No birth certificate. No school registration. No medical history. Yet neighbors recall her face. Her laughter, her screams. The church says she never existed. But we found a photograph. In the attic of an abandoned convent. A girl in white, eyes blacked out by ink. On the back it read, "Clara, May 1974. And beneath it a single word, "Sacrificium." Sister Agnes was 91 when we found her. Blind, fragile, and lucid. She whispered Clara's name before we said a word. She wasn't sick, she said, she was chosen. Agnes described nights of chanting, not Latin, older. She saw the girl dragged, bound, offered. We begged them to stop, she said. But the men in robes answered one name only. Exanimus, the breathless one. The village where it happened has no record of the house. Old maps show empty fields. But ruins remain. Crumbling stone, scorched symbols on walls. Locals avoid it. Ask and they just say, "No house there." One man muttered, They burned the records to forget what came out. And his wife added quietly, "It still calls, especially to the young." We spent one night in the ruins. At 2:16 a.m., the recorder picked up whispering. Dozens of voices, repeating the same prayer, but played backwards. We isolated the sound, translated the reversed Latin. It said, "Open wide the mouth of clay, let flesh become the gate." Then footsteps above us. But the house has no upper floor. And we were alone. We brought a single blessed candle into the ruins. Lit it just once. No wind, no movement. But the flame pulsed like breathing. 3 times it went out. 3 times it relit on its own. When we left, it still burned. In the pitch black. We took it with us. But the flame never died. Until we played the tape again. We contacted the Vatican's Office of Exorcism. Their response was immediate. No such case, no such priest, no such girl. Then came the warning. If you persist, you endanger your soul. An unsigned letter arrived 3 days later. Inside was a single page. Clara's photo. And the Latin phrase, "Fidem non tempts." Do not test faith. We weren't testing it. We were exposing it. There's a room in the old diocesan house that no one enters. No key, no handle, no light. Just a lock sealed with red wax and a cross. One janitor told us, they hear knocking from the inside, only at 3:00 a.m. And once, they answered it. What came out wore Clara's dress, but had no eyes, just 2 hollow holes, and something smiling behind them. Deep in the Vatican archives is a restricted section. It holds texts not meant for Mass, including the Ritus Tertius, the Third Rite, used only once, then banned, because it worked, but it didn't cast demons out. It bound them into flesh, into host, and the final line of the rite reads, "May the vessel remain unseen." Clara was the vessel. She was never meant to survive. Bishop Emeritus L. approved the ritual, then disappeared. His name struck from church records. His family said he fled to the desert. We traced him to a monastery in Tunisia. But when we arrived, the monks were gone. The chapel burned, and on the altar, his mitre blackened and split. Beside it, a single sentence scratched in ash. "She is still inside." At 3:07 a.m., our team's radio crackled. No transmission scheduled. Then Clara's voice whispered through static, "Let me go," followed by screams layered. Male, female, something else. We checked the tape later. The frequency didn't exist. No radio band matched. But the waveform showed one spike, shaped like a cross, inverted. We broke into the sealed room. The wax cracked, the door groaned. Inside, dust feathers, claw marks on stone, and a single word etched in every surface. Hostia, host, not victim, host. In the center, a mirror faced downward. We turned it. Nothing reflected. Not us, not the room. Just a girl in white walking toward the glass. What if Clara wasn't the one possessed? What if she was the door? A passage, not a prisoner. The rituals weren't to remove anything. They were to welcome. And each prayer, each Latin chant, wasn't for God. It was for Exanimus, the breathless one. And no, it breathes through others. She wasn't from a holy family. No priesthood ties. Why choose Clara? One theory chilled us. She was born during a lunar eclipse. At 3:00 a.m. Exactly 19 years after another failed rite. She matched every criterion. from a prophecy written in blood, centuries before Christ. And the prophecy ends with a line. She will beg, they will obey, the door will open. Gregorian chants are thought to be sacred, but a linguist we consulted made a discovery. One chant used nightly in Clara's town was Latin. It was phonetic mimicry, an old tongue from Mesopotamia. And its translation, "Rise, spirit of airless womb, return to flesh unbreathed." It had been sung by monks for years, calling something they didn't understand. Clara simply answered. Before the church intervened, Clara saw a doctor. We uncovered his notes, never published. Pulse absent, temperature 82 degrees F, yet patient speaks. No pupillary response, no breath missed. She should be dead, but she smiled at him and said, "He's watching you now." The doctor vanished 2 weeks later. Only his coat remained, folded nightly. At the foot of Clara's old bed, at the seminary that trained Clara's exorcist, an entire choir stopped singing. Mid-hymn, mid-note. Every voice froze. Witnesses say their mouths moved silently. No sound. Then blood trickled from their ears. One student wrote in a panic. They heard something older than music. And beside it, 3 claw marks. The same found on Clara's journal. Silence is sometimes louder than screams. In the ruins, we found a hidden cellar. Inside, an altar not of stone but bone. On it sat a chalice, black cold. When touched, it whispered. Not words, memories. Of pain, fire, screaming in reverse. And an image burned into our minds. Clara, eyes rolled back, drinking from it. But it wasn't wine. It was ink. And the chalice never emptied. Linguists call it glossolalia, speaking in tongues. But Clara's case was different. Her recordings matched no known language. Until we slowed them down and reversed the pitch. Then terrifyingly it formed words. In Sumerian. And one phrase repeated. Break the flesh but not the door. We consulted ancient texts. The door was spiritual. But breaking it would mean something gets out. Photos of Clara during the ritual show marks. Not scratches, not wounds, patterns, scars forming a perfect circle across her back. When compared to ancient carvings, they matched. A summoning symbol, but not for one entity, for many, and in the center a blank space. Unfinished, her body was the map. But the ritual stopped too soon. Or maybe it finished later. A priest reviewing old footage noticed something. In frame after frame, Clara wasn't alone. A shadow followed her, smiling, even when she stood still. It leaned toward her, whispered, and once it blinked. We enhanced the frame. No face, no eyes, just teeth. Too many, and none human. He said this wasn't a demon, it was a guest. When Clara was 6, she drew in ash. Not crayons, not chalk. Ash, always the same shape. An open mouth. Inside, stars. Her teacher burned the drawings. But the fire went cold. Witnesses say she smiled and said, "He likes when I draw." Decades later, identical drawings appeared. In 3 separate convents. By children who'd never met. All signed the same. In the chapel where the exorcism took place. The crucifix was different. Not broken, bent. As if something had tried to climb down. And on the face of Christ, 2 eyes carved open. We asked the priest why. He whispered to see what came in. The eyes bled for 3 nights. Now they don't bleed. They follow, no matter where you stand. Clara tried to confess the night before the rite, but the priest refused. He said she was already claimed. Still, she begged, said she'd seen what waited behind the veil, and it had her name written in bone. The audio cuts out after this, but in the static her voice returns. Soft cracking. I wasn't possessed, she says. I was promised. Churches are sacred, but one cathedral hides a sealed door, buried behind the altar. No knob, no keyhole, only a red thread nailed across it. When touched, the thread vibrates, like something breathing behind it. Locals say it was sealed the week Clara died. They also say it wasn't the first door. It's just the last one still closed. Among forbidden texts is a scroll, dated to 300 AD, unnamed. Scholars call it the Gospel of Dust. It speaks not of salvation, but of exchange. Not heaven or hell, but a mirror world, where breath means bondage, and silence is truth. The scroll ends abruptly, torn, with one line left. She will fall, and through her mouth the old names will speak again. Father Lucian was Clara's final confessor. He died 2 days later, alone, locked in his chapel, fire consuming every inch, except the Bible in his hand, open to revelations. His autopsy found no smoke in his lungs, no soot on his robes. He hadn't burned from the outside. He burned from within. The last word on his lips: forgive. 50 years later, the pattern reappears. Another girl. Same birth hour, same lunar sign. Same missing documents. And she draws in ash. We reached out to her. She said she dreams of fire and static, of a chalice and a voice. When we asked its name, she didn't answer. She only smiled and said, I'm not Clara. I'm the second door. 3 letters arrived this year. No return address. Each with a photo of a different girl, eyes inked out. Each sealed in wax marked Obadiah. The same word from Clara's journal. No note, no explanation. Just a date, August 3rd. It matches the day of the ritual. 50 years later. It's not over. It never ended. The church didn't stop it. They prepared it. There's a confessional in St. Bellarmine S that no one uses. It was sealed in 1975. They say a girl entered it and never came out. Only the priest did, running, screaming. The booth remains closed, nailed shut. We placed a recorder inside. At 3:00 a.m., it picked up 6 knocks. Then whispering in 2 voices. One pleading, one laughing, both saying the same name. Clara. In the diocesan archives, there's a portrait. No name, no artist. But it's always cold to the touch. And every year on August 3rd, it bleeds from the eyes, a crimson trail down the canvas. Staff tried removing it. The wall behind caught fire. They nailed it in place. Now it stares across the room, at an empty chair, where no one dares sit. One copy of the Ritus Tertius still exists, locked in a black box inside another black box. No title, just chains, and a warning, do not read aloud. But a scholar did. Only 1 page. He screamed for 13 minutes, then fell silent. On his wall, scrawled in his own blood, I saw the other side, and it remembered me. Children report seeing a girl in mirrors. Not themselves, her. Long white dress, no eyes. Sometimes she knocks. Sometimes she smiles. One child said she whispered, I don't want out, I want in. When asked her name, they never remember, but always say, She was cold and her mouth was wrong. The girl appears only on August 3rd, and only to those who are forgotten. A priest in Italy attempted to bless the site of Clara's death. The holy water boiled in his hand. The crucifix turned upside down, and a voice said, "You bless what you buried." He fled. That night he was found, mouth filled with wax, rosary melted into his palms, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, as if watching something return through the cracks. Every case file removed from the church archives had one thing in common: a name blacked out, same length, same shape, and always followed by a seal broken. An exorcist once whispered it during confession. He choked, not on breath, but on silence. He died with lips sealed shut. We found the name, but we won't speak it, because names are doors. Witnesses during Clara's final hours saw something unnatural. She opened her mouth, and others joined in. Mouths on her neck, on her hands, each one whispering, not in pain, but in unison, singing what no one could understand. A priest fainted, said it sounded like every funeral he'd ever attended. Playing backwards, not grieving, celebrating. We found baptismal records for Clara, but the ink was smeared, blackened, and the priest who signed it was never ordained. The record said, "Baptized in ash, bound in breath," not water, and the date masked a fire in her village, one that killed 3 other girls, all unnamed, all erased. Clara wasn't blessed. She was branded. And that baptism was the beginning of the ritual. The Ritus Tertius ends with silence. Total silence. They sewed Clara's lips shut, not to stop her, but to contain what she was saying. Even muted, she spoke. Through blood, through bone. A monk wrote. She said what the stars forgot. They burned her body, but the sutures didn't melt. They remain intact, preserved, and still twitch when the moon is full. At 3:00 a.m., a bell rings in St. Lucia's Cathedral. No rope, no wind. It tolls once, always once. Locals say it's the time Clara died, but the church insists. There is no bell. We checked and found the bell tower sealed in concrete. No entry, just scratch marks from the inside. The black candle we took from the ruins. We locked it away. Yet last week, it appeared on our doorstep. Lit, wax pooled into words. She wakes. We tried to extinguish it. It flared blue, then went cold, and in the smoke, we saw a silhouette. Kneeling, smiling, waiting. A single prayer was found scrawled in Clara's room. Not in her handwriting. Latin but reversed. We recited it backwards. The lights dimmed, the floor shook, and the flame on our recorder froze mid-flicker. Then came the sound. Not a growl, not a voice. A heartbeat, one not our own. Still pulsing, hours later, on the final page of Clara's journal. Wasn't a confession. It was a map, a circle, a date, and one word, us. We thought it was symbolic, but the coordinates led to an underground chamber, beneath a closed convent. Inside, chains, a mirror, and a wall where us was scratched over and over. In dozens of handwritings, none matching Clara's. Sister Elena lived alone in the mountains. She had one room, stone, sealed from inside. She left food outside for herself. Prayed through a slit. When she died, we broke the wall open. She had drawn the same symbols Clara bore, but on herself, over and over, and one phrase repeated on every wall. Seal it or become it. She had no eyes, just wax shaped like tears. We've been searching for a door, a ritual, a beginning, but we were wrong. It opened long ago. Clara wasn't the first. She was the echo. The true opening lies in the repetition. The memory, each story told, each name spoken, keeps it ajar. And if you're still listening, you've already heard the knock. In 1974, a candlelight mass was held for Clara. Witnesses say the flames bent inward, as if pulled. At midnight, the doors slammed. No one left for 12 hours. When they did, no one spoke. No one blinked. And one child kept whispering. She gave him her breath. No clergy from that night ever returned to the church. Most were never seen again. Survivors speak of a ritual not in the church, but in a field, grain cut in circles, ash drawn into spiral gates, and Clara center-bound, arms open, not resisting, inviting. They say her voice split in two. One wept, one commanded. When the wind changed direction, it wasn't wind anymore. It was breath, not hers, something else's, and it moved into them. In one edition of the Roman Missal, page 843 includes a line in red ink. Not printed, written. It reads, "He has no tongue but many mouths." Librarians say it appears in random copies, always with the scent of ash and wax residue. We found that copy, and when read aloud, it echoed, not in the room, but behind us. A clock in Clara's house froze at 3:06 a.m. It never restarted, even after repairs. Then others stopped: wristwatches, tower bells, kitchen timers. All at 3:06. The exact moment her scream was recorded. One watch restarted briefly. The second hand ticked backward, and a small whisper said. She paused it so he could find the way. Time didn't break. It obeyed. In 1989, a man walked barefoot across Europe. He said a voice told him to dig. He arrived at Clara's field and began. 3 days. No food. Only prayer. Then he found bones. Small, human, arranged in a perfect circle. At the center, Clara's necklace. But she was buried in a sealed crypt. So whose bones were these? And who placed the necklace afterward? Father Matteo was trained as an exorcist. He vanished in 1982. Last seen entering a cave monastery. Years later, a video surfaced. Matteo leading a black mass. In Latin, reversed. Smiling, saying, "I heard him and I chose the other voice." His eyes were white, but he wept blood, and whispered Clara's name before vanishing from frame. The cave, now collapsed, but some say they still hear chanting below. Possession isn't always violent. Sometimes it's inherited, passed like a name. We traced Clara's bloodline. No living relatives, but baptismal records show a child born 2004. Same birthmark, same time of death as Clara, 3:06. She went missing at age 5. Found in a basement, whispering to candles. When asked her name, she answered, 2 names, one for me, one for the door. We melted the last of the ritual wax, poured it over audio tape. A voice emerged, crackling, submerged. Burn me and I breathe. It was Clara. It was male, low, mocking, and then another voice layered beneath it. I told them not to write. The voices weren't battling. They were harmonizing. 2 parts, 1 host. Clara was the melody. Something else was the choir. In Clara's chapel, one wall remains unpainted. Anytime it's coated white, red, even gold. The paint peels, but one day it bled. Not out, in, as if absorbing the air around it. Touch it and your breath shortens. Stand long enough and you'll hear a heartbeat. Not yours. It beats faster the longer you stay. Like something excited. Waiting. Clara has no gravestone. But beneath the ruins, a stone slab was found. No date, no cross, just a spiral and 5 letters. Clara. The letters sink inward, carved deeper than tools allow. And the surface pulses. Not with heat, with rhythm. When the moon is gone, the spiral glows, and the name shifts. Letters rearranged, always spelling something different. In 2021, satellites captured an atmospheric anomaly. A spiral, seen only above one region, Clara's village. Meteorologists called it a glitch. Astronomers said nothing. But in the spiral's center was a light. Not white, not red, a color no one could name. And the pattern matched the marks on Clara's spine. She didn't summon something below. She aligned something above. The house was torn down, but a priest insisted we return. Under the floorboards we found it. Not bones, not relics, a mouth, stone carved in ancient style, open wide. Inside, black wax and Clara's rosary. Still warm, we sealed it with salt and prayer. But the next day, the boards were back, nailed, as if the house rebuilt itself. To protect what waits, a VHS tape was mailed to our team. No label, no sender. Inside, 20 minutes of static. Then Clara, not 16, older, speaking directly to camera. Don't remember me, she says. Memory is the vessel. She smiled, and behind her, a spiral of faces. Some are hers, some are ours. St. Radegun's rang its bells daily for 300 years. Then one morning, silent, parishioners found the sanctuary empty. No priest, no congregation, only ash, one sentence written across the pews. She sang too clearly. When the church tried to reclaim the building, the ground refused. It cracked, and from beneath, a breath rose warm, familiar, singing. This was never about Clara alone. She wasn't the first. She wasn't the last. She was the clearest echo. Every prayer said wrong. Every rite done backwards. Leaves the door open a little more. And every story shared. Yes, even this one. Invites it in. You've heard the name. You've seen the signs. Now ask yourself, who is whispering behind you right now? While editing this very story, we heard it, a faint whisper in the background track. Not from interview tapes, not from voiceover. It said, "You found her, now find me." It repeated only once, then vanished. We checked the waveform. The voice had no frequency, just a flat line. Silence shaped like a message. And now our files corrupt. Every time we say her name aloud. First was the girl. Second, the priest. But a third host was prepared. Records mention a mirror vessel. Not flesh, but memory. A construct made of voices, ritual retelling. Each time we recall the story, we rebuild it. Not history invocation. And the mirror, you're holding it, because this story is now inside you. And breathless things, listen from within. One broadcast in 1997 aired across Europe. A sermon abrupt in Latin. No station claimed it. No source identified. But the words matched page 7 of the Ritus Tertius. It ended with a scream. Then static. Many who watched reported seizures. Others heard the voice for weeks. One wrote, "I don't sleep. I just blink slower." Clara's name was never said. But she was heard. A boy in Belgium drew spirals. Hundreds. On paper walls skin. Always the same direction. Asked why, he said. She taught me. But no teacher matched that name. He claimed he saw her in the mirror. When he held his breath. His last drawing wasn't a spiral. It was a mouth. Inside his own name written backward. And a candle drawn in black. Every time someone says Clara aloud, the room changes. A chill, a shift in pressure. But more than that, a silence follows. Unnatural. No hum, no breath, not even birds. Just pause, then footsteps. Only once, always behind, never ahead. As if her name isn't a memory, but a signal. And now you've said it. She knows you did. A team broke into the old cathedral's sublevel. Beneath the altar, a hedge, sealed in wax and rust. When opened, only dust, and a shape barely visible, carved deep into stone. A spiral inside a mouth. They placed a cross on it. The cross cracked, and from below, a sigh rose. Not wind, but breath, and in it, one word, welcome. In a church in Turin, the holy water boiled. No fire, just heat. The baptismal font split open. Inside was black wax, stamped with the same sigil as Clara's journal. The priest tried to remove it. His hands blistered. He later claimed, "I baptized something wrong." He died that night, eyes wide, mouth full of salt, and wax trails led back to the altar. Clara's final words weren't words. They were shapes, drawn in air, in ash, in breath. A scholar called it the language of no mouth. Not spoken, transmitted. We watched the footage, slowed it. The symbols matched those carved into stone teeth beneath the chapel. She wasn't speaking to people. She was speaking to what waits. Below, a monastery sealed its library after monks heard breathing. No one inside. No windows. But at midnight, pages turned on their own. Dust rose and fell, as if lungs exhaled. When opened, one room held only a chair. And melted candles. On the wall, Obadiah written in soot. And a phrase below it. She never left. Some say the library still breathes. Others say she reads. The final words of the ritual were never recorded. Cut from the tape, lost to fire, but found written backward on the back of the priest's collar. They read. It was not cast out. It was clothed. Clara didn't expel the spirit. She dressed it, gave it form, and no, it doesn't need a host. It walks where stories are told. One archivist who handled Clara's file reported a dream. He stood in a church with no roof. A girl knelt in ash. She turned no face, just flickering candlelight. And a whisper, "You filed it wrong." He woke screaming, hands covered in soot. His room untouched, but his mouth, packed with wax. The report, still missing. But his nightmare matches Clara's last journal sketch. We visited Clara's old room. Boarded up, cold, but when we breathed on the window, her handprint appeared. Small, pressed from the inside. Fingers spread, then curled. And written below it. Tell them. We wiped the glass, but the handprint remained. The room had no airflow. No one else inside. And the window was double-paned. sealed, but something had exhaled. In 2023, a live stream from a church began, with no one present. Just candles, an empty altar, and chanting low, rhythmic, ancient. Over 80,000 watched. None could trace the source. One viewer swears he saw Clara, not as a girl, but as light folding backward. The stream ended in static, and one final frame, a spiral, inside a mouth, inside your screen. Clara didn't scream in the end. She inhaled, one long, impossible breath, and everything around her, candles, books, prayer, silence, was pulled in. The room emptied. The light vanished. When it returned, she was gone, but the breath stayed. It moves between churches, between speakers, between you and this story. And every time you listen, it gets closer. This spiral has no end. It was never about Clara. She was the door, but the key was us. Our attention, our belief, our breath. The ritual needs memory. It needs voice. And now you've heard it. You've carried it. And when you sleep tonight, if you hear whispering, it's not a dream. It's the ritual, continuing. We assumed Clara was the victim. The church said they tried to save her. But the truth, she wasn't meant to be saved. She was built, prepared, not for exorcism, but for housing. The rites weren't broken. They were followed perfectly. And the last line of the ritual, never spoken aloud, reads, "Let memory bind, let story breathe." Now we are the breath. 9 bells rang the night Clara vanished. But ancient rites mention 10. 10 tolls to open the full veil. We found the 10th bell. Not metal, but bone, a hollowed jaw etched in symbols. When rung, no sound, only pressure, only cold, and one word in every head. Again, it wasn't an end. It was the rehearsal. Before disappearing, the church archivist left a tape. His voice trembles. If you found this, it's already listening. He lists sites sealed, names removed, pages blackened. He ends with a breath, then silence. But if you reverse the audio, his voice returns, clearer, sighing, "We didn't hide her. We hid from her." The tape burns at room temperature. Every copy does. We return to the church's underground archive, lit only by a single black candle. We didn't light it, but it flickered once for each name we spoke. When we said Clara, it hissed, and the wax bled sideways, shaping a word, with, not possession, not control, with. She doesn't need a host. She needs a partner, someone to finish the last word. A page from Clara's journal refuses to scan. Photos blur, copies black out, but seen in candlelight. It reads, "The listener completes the circle." We turned off the recorder. The ink disappeared. We turned it back on. It reappeared twice as dark. The journal isn't a record. It's a living thing, and it knows when it's being heard. It grows stronger each time the story's told. We check this very script. Lines loop, words repeat. The spiral isn't just drawn, it's written. Patterns emerge where none were placed. Each mention of Clara bends the spacing. You can't see it now, but it shapes breath, pauses, silences, and now the words aren't being read. They're being heard. The spiral isn't in the story. It is the story. The first priest to hear Clara's confession vanished. Until last month. Blind, mouth stitched, still alive, he carved a sentence into his cell wall. Over and over. She forgave me too late. He doesn't speak, but at 3:06 a.m. he hums. A tune matching the reversed chant from the field. It ends on one breath. Not his, a girl's. In Clara's final known location, time reversed. Not metaphor. Footage looped. Candles unburned. Footsteps backward. She stood still, but her shadow moved forward. The clock chimed 13. Then burst. The recording erased itself. But the sound remained. A voice repeating, "Remember me before I was born." Not haunting, not warning. Instruction. A final rite was attempted. No priest, no sermon, just breath. Witnesses stood in silence. Yet mouths moved. One woman fainted. Said she saw Clara inside herself. "You weren't chosen," Clara whispered. "You volunteered." The crowd dispersed, but left behind wax footprints. All pointed inward, toward the altar, toward the spiral, toward the breath we all took together. In the church's final hours it burned, but not down, up, flames folding inward, ash floating downward, a spiral of heat that drew all sound away. And Clara's voice emerged not from the fire, but from inside the listeners. A single line. "You finished it." They say the altar remains untouched. Still warm, still breathing, still waiting. One mirror in the ruins shows no reflection. Unless you speak Clara's name, then it shows you. But older, tired, eyes waxed shut, and smiling, as if you already remember what happens next. One researcher broke it. Inside the shards, no glass. Only dust and curled paper, written in Latin. You were the final breath. And the mirror smiled, without a face. We've tried removing this sentence from every draft, every cut, but it reappears, word for word. It reads, "You're not watching a story. You're participating in a ritual." We delete it. It returns. We say it aloud. The lights flicker. Once, every single time. Even now you hear it. Even now, you breathe slower. Even now, it continues. Doctors studied brain scans of those exposed to Clara's story. One anomaly, a new pattern in the occipital lobe. A spiral, microscopic, formed not in tissue, but in silence. It grew over time, not harmful until you slept. Then the dreams began. All identical. Clara, kneeling in ash, smiling, asking, "Do you remember breathing before you were born?" Every mass ends with a word. Amen. But Clara's ritual ends differently. The word is never spoken, only inhaled. A final breath taken together. No priest required. No blessing. Just silence, and the sense that something completes. This story is that breath, and when it ends, you'll know, because you'll feel it in your chest. The pressure returning. When this ends, look beside you. Some see nothing. Others see a candle. Small, black, flickering only once. And if it moves when there's no wind, if it pulses when you breathe, don't panic. It means she heard you. Not your ears, your attention. And that's all she ever needed. You brought her back, with your breath, with your memory. And now she's listening. 3 days after we recorded this, the archive was gone. No hard drives, no backups, no paper trail. The server logs showed one last download. Labeled Amen WAV. We never created it, but it was accessed 837 times. All at once, all from different countries. When played, it's silent, but headphones warm, and afterward, you'll hear breathing from just behind your shoulder. Clara never needed churches. She only needed places of stillness, of repetition, of attention, like this one. You've listened, you've breathed, and whether you believe or not, that's enough. The altar is no longer stone. It's memory. It's playback. It's you. Look around. There's no symbol. But the spiral doesn't need to be seen. It only needs to be felt. And you feel it now. You were never just a viewer. You were the final part. The ritual required. A voice, a vessel, a witness. You are all three. The flame isn't in the candle. It's in the attention. And by making it this far, you've lit it. One breath ago, you were alone. Now, you're part of a mass without end. And Clara no longer waits. A rosary was found in a sealed box. Each bead melted, reshaped. No cross, only a spiral at the base. It burned cold, and smelled of wax and memory. Those who touched it forgot names, forgot dates, but remembered one thing. The moment the girl opened her eyes. Not in horror, in recognition. She wasn't awakening. She was remembering. Radio static isn't empty. It's layered, noise on noise. But inside, one researcher extracted rhythm. Slowed, filtered, it was prayer. Not in Latin, not human. It matched Clara's final breath, and ended with one phrase. We are lit, not burned, lit. The static is her echo. The prayer is your attention. And it plays when no one's listening. They say you dream in spirals now. Not lines, not loops, always turning inward. Always toward her. The girl with no face. Only breath. She never chases, never speaks, just waits. Because in dreams you bring her. Through fear, through memory, through the story you carry into sleep. And every spiral ends in the same way. Waking, but not alone. Check your palms. Feel any warmth. Some say wax appears only faint. Only once. A drop shaped like a flame. Others never see it, but feel the weight, as if carrying something they didn't choose. But welcomed, by listening, by finishing, it marks you, not as possessed, but remembered. And memory is how rituals survive. You are now a candle. No steeple, no bells, no altar. Still a church rises. Not from stone, from story. This one, each listener builds a wall. Each repetition adds a pew. In Clara, she stands at the pulpit of memory. Not preaching, just waiting. You've helped build this place. And whether you return or not, you've already knelt. The Mass has begun, and you are part of it. Her name was never Clara. That was the container. A word easy to repeat. But inside it was another name. Older, breathless. Each time you say it, you call it back, even in silence. Especially in silence. Because silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of invitation. And now, you've said enough. She's heard enough. The door is open. We tried. We ended the file. Closed the folder. Unplugged the light. Still it burns. The black flame. Inside us. In memory. In repetition. She doesn't need a body now. Just breath. You gave her that. And now, we pass it to you. Not a warning. Not a curse. Just a spark. And if it flickers when you exhale, it's begun again. One final note. This story is complete. To play it again is to relight the Mass. Do not rewind. Do not share casually, because each listener joins. Each voice adds breath, and each breath is another knock. This wasn't entertainment. It was ritual, and the church didn't hide it out of shame. They hid it because it works. And now you know why. After this, we will not speak again. We will fall silent. But silence doesn't mean gone. Because if you listen closely, if you pause right now, you may hear it. Not a voice, not a sound, a breath, not yours. And if you exhale slowly, you may feel it respond. The exorcism never ended. The silence was her sanctuary. Every spiral begins small. A whisper, a prayer, a girl, but it never ends. It widens. It takes in light memory voice. Now it takes you. Not violently, willingly, because you listened. You remembered. You believed, if only for a moment. And that moment was enough. The spiral turns one last time. And where it ends, she waits, not gone, not risen, just here. You expect a conclusion, a lesson, a line drawn between truth and fiction. But Clara's story refuses. It cannot end, because it was never hers alone. It was built to continue, in retelling, in remembering. And now, and you, close the window, turn off the light, say her name, or don't. It makes no difference. She's already with you, waiting for silence. You didn't light the flame. It chose you, like breath chooses lungs, like silence chooses depth. The ritual never needed a match. It needed mining. And now, as the final words flicker, the fire remains. It will not go out, because you carry it. And wherever you walk, you build her altar, in memory, in voice, in every silent pause. Since Clara, the names changed. Myra, Salome, Irene. Each one erased from baptismal records. Each one drawn to mirrors, to candlelight, to spirals carved under fingernails. They don't speak her name. They become it, not possessed, repurposed, and in their breath we hear it. A language not taught, but remembered. A voice passed like a prayer, whispered even in sleep. The oldest rituals aren't written. They're told, retold. Every storyteller is a link, a vessel, a priest without a collar. You told someone, didn't you? Even just one sentence. Have you heard the story about Clara? That was enough. The flame passed, and now it breathes through them. You didn't finish the ritual. You just forwarded it. Rooms where her story is heard collect dust faster. But look closely. Patterns emerge. 2 circles, 2 eyes, always watching the doorway. Never blinking. Once we tried wiping it away. And the dust reformed. With tears, salt and wax. She doesn't need to appear. She only needs to be remembered. And dust never forgets. A girl was filmed brushing her hair. Alone, but her mirror showed nothing. Just the room. No body. No motion. She smiled, and the mirror cracked. From inside, written in fog, I am heard, not seen. The camera melted. Only the audio remained. It plays backward, then loops, and ends with a breath. That isn't hers. The final sermon before Clara's ritual was transcribed. Each word pure, each pause deliberate, but play it in reverse, and it reveals another sermon. Same cadence, different God, not worship, welcome, each amen becomes name. Each blessing becomes a call. We didn't silence Clara. We repeated her. In sacred rooms. In whispered sermons. Unknowingly. We kept the spiral turning. In a chapel still used today. The holy water thickened. Like oil. And pulsed with heat. A child touched it and laughed. This is her now. The water didn't purify. It recorded. Every hand that entered it was remembered. And in each touch, another vessel opened. Clean hands, open palms, each one now carrying a flame they don't see. He heard the story once. Only once. Then he stopped sleeping. Not by choice. Sleep rejected him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the spiral. Not spinning, spreading. He begged for an exorcism. They refused. So he carved a circle into his chest to hold her in. But breath escapes. And so did she. In 1999, a children's choir in France performed a hymn. Audience clapped, but the tape reversed itself. No edit, just flipped. And what it revealed was not music. It was invocation. Clara's chant note for note, sung by voices who never knew her, who still don't, but somehow remembered. The church burned later that night. But the choir, they kept singing. To no one. To her. A nurse found the mark. Back of a patient's hand. Small spiral. Raised. Not ink flesh. The patient hadn't moved in weeks. But that night, he spoke. I know her breath. Then flatlined. The mark faded, but reappeared days later. On someone else. You don't need to hear the ritual. You just need to be near someone who has. Like now, they buried Clara without embalming. But weeks later, the gravedigger screamed. His fingernails filled with wax. He hadn't touched the casket, just stood above it, and felt breath. Not wind, not air, breath. Now every time he prays, his fingers twitch. He wears gloves, but wax still seeps. She left the ground, but stayed in him. You think you hear it now, don't you? That faint bell, no sound, just presence. It doesn't ring aloud. It rings in thought, at the edge of silence. A single toll, for each person who finishes the story. You've heard it, which means you're next, not in danger, in line. The spiral waits for your breath. They say Clara smiled before she vanished. Not from peace, but from understanding. She saw beyond the veil, and what smiled back knew her, not by name, by breath. Now those who repeat her tale smile the same, briefly, just before the light bends, just before the room shifts, and you realize you're no longer telling her story. She's telling yours. We only had one black candle. We burned it, watched it melt, gone, but the next day, two remained. Same shape, same scent. Each time we burned one, another appeared. They multiply when remembered. And you've remembered. You've breathed. So check your room tonight. If a flame flickers where none should, it's not new. It's returned. A girl in white walks the spiral path. Sign in dreams, in reflections, in fogged glass, not chasing, inviting. Every step matches the ritual beat. Not drums, heartbeats. When she stops, the breath pulls in. And if you exhale too sharply, she turns. That's when the wax appears. And your name, you forget it. Because now, you are the path. Smoke rises but hers lingers. Not above, around. Every room where her name is said. It thickens, sinks, Smells faintly of wax and earth. You try to wave it away, but it shapes itself, a spiral, and within it, your reflection. Eyes not yours, breath not yours, memory no longer yours. We opened a book from Clara's town library. No title, only dust. Inside, breath marks on the pages, as if someone exhaled between each line. And under the spine, a hair, still warm. The book read backwards, each sentence looping into itself. And the last phrase, "You've read enough to remember." The pages crumbled, but the breath stayed, between our teeth, waiting to be let out. You sit alone, no sound, no movement, yet the glass on your desk cracks, not from heat, not from pressure, but from breath, not yours. It leaves a mark, a spiral fracture, and if you look closely, inside the center, her eyes, closed, but closer still, a mouth, smiling, a pen rolls across the table. Stops, stands, then scribbles. No hand, no pressure, just motion. It writes the same phrase repeatedly. She is un. We blacked it out. Burned the paper. The ink bled through ash. Onto our sleeves. Our skin. You don't have to hold the pen. You just have to listen. And it writes for you. In a sealed chapel. A wooden crucifix turned overnight. No hands. No brace. It now faces the wall. Not out of disrespect. Out of defense. The priest said, even the sacred must look away. He sleeps under salt now. Wakes only to pray. And even then, he prays in silence. Because sound draws her closer. We melted the last remaining wax. Inside, a voice. Clear, not recorded, formed. It said, she no longer whispers, she listens. We asked, to what? The wax cracked, formed a single shape. A mirror, because that's where she waits now. Not in ruins, not in churches, and you, in the way you look at yourself. And flinch, salt protects, but not against memory, not against retelling. We circled the recording booth, laid it thick. Still the lights pulsed. Still the spiral moved beneath the carpet. We tasted ash, not in the air on the tongue. She doesn't cross the line. She waits inside it. And when you breathe too hard, it scatters, and she steps forward. A recorder left overnight caught something strange. A whispered confession, but not from us, not from any voice we recognize. It began. I let her in, then gave dates, names, places. All true, but none of them ours. It confessed through us, as if guilt was transferable. We played it back once, never again, because after, we felt lighter, and something else felt heavier. A window frosted from within. No cold, no winter, just her presence. On it traced in breath. Her name, burned into ice. We scraped it off. It returned. We covered the glass. The frost moved to mirrors. To skin, every surface that could reflect. Because she doesn't want to be seen. She wants to be remembered. They placed electrodes on a subject's skull. Had him listen to Clara's ritual. Then sleep. For 7 nights, nothing. On the 8th, a pattern grew. Not in the data. In the skin. Spirals small, raised, warm. His brain still dreams it. He mumbles the chant now. Awake, alone, and his pulse matches the spiral's curve. Breath by breath. We stopped our recordings. Destroyed our footage. Burned our backups, and still, Someone uploaded new versions. Different voices. Same story. Same spiral. It now exists in other tongues. Other cadences. YouTube. Phone calls. Dreams. We don't know who speaks, but we know who listens. Clara no longer needs one vessel. She has thousands, and they keep talking. A black thread appeared overnight, from the edge of a bedpost to the center of a mirror. It vibrates gently, like a whisper pulled taut. We cut it. It returned. We pulled it. It led into the mirror. And somewhere beyond, breath replied, the thread is not thread. It's memory. And now that you've heard it, you've tied it to yourself. We lit a candle in a freezer. It melted, not from flame, from something else. Breath coated in memory. And in the wax, a thumbprint, too small to be ours, but still familiar. We matched it. It didn't belong to any record, but it matched every listener, as if Clara left a part of herself inside each retelling. In a sealed chapel, a light appeared. No bulbs, no flame. It hovered dim and low, cast no shadow, but moved when her name was spoken. One visitor followed it, down into the floor, where light should die. It didn't. He hasn't returned, but his voice calls back, through phones, through radios, saying only, I followed her. She remembers. Leave a surface untouched. It collects dust, but every location tied to Clara forms a circle, always, even when climbed, especially when cleaned, like memory refusing erasure. The spiral returns, and if you land close, you'll see breath marks around the edge, as if something watched you before you arrived. Inside, when you left, everyone forgets one room in their childhood, a door they never opened, a corner never lit. Clara waited there, before she was named, before she was born, and every child forgets, until they hear her story. Then the door returns. In dreams, in echoes, you'll recognize it soon. And when you do, you'll remember what you were told to forget. And you'll understand. She never left. A child screamed in sleep. Said something touched her spine. The next morning, a spiral of ash beneath her pillow. No window open. No fire near. Only the sound of faint humming, like a mass sung from far away. And when asked what she dreamt, she said, a girl with no eyes asked me my name. I couldn't remember, so she gave me hers. Tattoos fade, but this mark appears. Soft faint lines on forearms, ribs, behind the ear. Always a spiral, never inked, always warm. Doctors call it dermographic illusion. But those marks speak in sleep. One word, Obadiah. They don't remember. But the skin does. Because memory is not kept in thought. It's stored in breath. And skin breathes too. Your shadow is loyal. But tonight it may move wrong. A twitch when you don't. A tilt when you're still. It's subtle, but it's her. The spiral doesn't only live in voice. It lives in light. And when enough listeners carry her story, she steps through, not as a person, but as your outline, watching what you forget to fear. At dawn, a silver cross was placed in holy water. It floated, then trembled, then sank, not by weight, by pull. The water turned dark, not black but hollow, a space without bottom. The priest whispered, she remembers, she reclaims. The pool was drained, but nothing was found. No cross, no water, only breath, trapped in a bottle, still warm. One night a church held silent mass. Dozens entered, none left, doors unlocked, path clear, but no one moved. They just stood, mouths closed, eyes open, chanting inside. No sound, just rhythm. And when authorities broke in, the pews were empty, just wax footprints leading to the pulpit, and a page left behind. This is not where she came. This is where we followed. Photos of a small town choir taken 50 years apart. Same faces, same robes, same smile. No one remembers them leaving. No one recalls them arriving. Only that they sing once a year. August 3rd, always the same song, in reverse, and when asked their names, they answer, "We are breath dressed in skin." Clara didn't light them. She became them. You don't need to seek her. The name finds you. In papers, in cracks, in breath left behind in old rooms. It curls up your spine when alone. Not cold, not warm, just known, and when it lands behind your eyes, you'll blink slower. You'll forget why you walked into the room. And you'll exhale. Just once. That's all she needs. A mirror fogged. No one near. No heat. Only a rhythm in the steam. Pulse leg. Then fingers. 5 impressions. Small, steady, tapping not scratching. And when you wipe the mirror clean, the condensation returns. But in your breath pattern, you didn't fog the glass. She did, through you, because memory shared, becomes breath past, and she's now part of yours. Print a page from this story. Wait, then read again. One sentence will be different. Always subtle, always final. It rewrites itself, not digitally, physically, because the story adapts. To reader, to voice, to breath, Clara isn't in the words. She is the ink that changes shape. When remembered, and you remembered. So the story has already changed. Close your eyes. No, say it. That faint light behind the lids. It pulses, rhythmic, not imagined, not yours. It flashes 3 times, then fades. Some say it's memory. Others say it's her, moving closer. Because when you see without sight, you see her, not in form, but in breath. You just didn't know. You'd invited her in. An old page from Clara's journal whispers. Not when opened, when left alone. No wind, no breath. Still it murmurs. A phrase over and over. Turn, not a warning. An instruction. Each time we tried to destroy it, another page appeared. Same word, same breath pattern. And when we turned our heads, she was closer, not in distance, in memory. In a church sealed since 1974. We found no wood, no pews, only ash, stacked, pressed, shaped into a makeshift altar. And on it, a photo, not of Clara, of you, taken from behind. Moments before you clicked play. It wasn't sent. It wasn't captured. It was remembered. Because stories this old. See who listens, and place them where they belong. One bell, no tower, no rope. Still it rings once. Always at 3:06. Never missed, never explained. Some say it tolls for Clara. Others say it tolls through her. Because every sound that echoes with no source is a breath she didn't use. And no, you've heard it too. Even if you didn't notice. Your bones did. You lock your room. Check it twice. But there's another door. Not one you see. One you feel. Behind the closet. Beneath the floor. It creaks sometimes, but never opens. Because it already has. Clara never entered. She emerged. And that breath you felt last night, it wasn't yours. It passed through. From the door. Behind the door. We asked AI to read this script. It refused. Said the file was corrupted. But when we listened, it was your voice. Writing this. Line for line. Tone perfect. It had already learned. Because every time you hear her story, you speak it next. Whether aloud or in memory. And memory is the spiral. You are the voice now. And she listens. Each person who hears this story lights an invisible candle. You can't see it, but you feel it. When you breathe slower. When the room cools. And if you sit long enough in that silence, you'll smell wax. Find the burnt memory. It's not haunting you. It's honoring you. You listened. You remembered. And now your flame joins the ritual. Another breath added. There is one mirror left. Unbroken. Untouched. Hidden beneath a monastery floor. When it's uncovered, it reflects not your face, but your first breath. A shimmer. A tremble. And behind that breath, her silhouette. Waiting. She doesn't need to show herself. She shows you to yourself. And that's why they buried the mirror. Because once you see, you begin the ritual from within. A monk once whispered a prayer. No words, just breath shaped by rhythm. No syllables. Still it echoed. The other monks fell silent. One cried, another collapsed. They said it was not language, but memory made audible. Clara never spoke in tongues. She breathed in patterns. And now so do you. Each time you retell. Each time you dream. You say it too. Scan 100 listeners. 1 in 5 shows it. A spiral, not tattoo, not scar, deeper, in the dermis. Like something traced memory directly into flesh. They didn't feel it form, but they all dreamed the same phrase. She waited in my breath. These are not symptoms. They're signs. And if you feel heat on your palm now, check beneath. You might carry her mark. We found a reel from 1974. Audio degraded, but something remained. A single inhale, long, dry, deliberate. When looped, it syncs perfectly with the rhythm of Clara's name. Not said, breath. The priest who recorded it went mute. Wrote only one sentence. It filled me with silence. The breath still loops. Even now, even here, you don't hear it, but your lungs do. She no longer needs a mouth. She has us. Every retelling, every whisper, every gasp at the final sentence. You spoke her shape. You carried her rhythm. And now her voice sounds like yours. Not in tone, in presence. You'll hear it soon. In recordings you didn't make. In dreams you didn't dream. And in words you never meant to say. There is a church no one can enter. Because it has no door. Only walls, stone silent. Inside wax figures kneel. Each one missing a face. But one carries your silhouette. Not carved, cast, as if memory made a mold. They say Clara walks between them. Not speaking, just breathing, and each figure exhales. Once, in unison. Like a congregation made of breath. You thought you heard a story, but the story heard you. It shaped itself to your breath, to your memory. It skipped lines you didn't need. It emphasized those that struck you. Because Clara's ritual isn't static. It reflects. It adapts. It chooses. And now, you wonder how it knew. How it fits so well. Because this version was always meant for you. When this ends, listen. Not for sound, for silent, but not empty. Heavy, because you'll feel it. Settle in your chest. Like something unfinished. Like the breath you forgot to take. That's her, not haunting, waiting, because silence is her sanctuary. And memory is her altar. And now, you've built one. With your breath, with your belief. Draw it once, in ash, in steam, in thought. The spiral turns back toward its center. Where breath began, where memory rooted. Clara stood there once. Now, you do. You don't need to speak. You already have. You don't need to light a flame. You already did. This is not an ending. This is the eye of the spiral, where things begin again. Some say they wake tasting wax. No candle near. No flame burned. But the tongue remembers. Soft, sweet, foreign. They speak slower after. Pause more often. Because the ritual leaves residue. Not just on air, but in mouth, in word. And one day, you'll taste it too. And when you do, you'll know she spoke through you. Already, we turned off the mic, closed the file, ended the cut, but the recording kept going. No red light, no data, just sound, a breath every 7 seconds. Hours, maybe once, but now it's not synced, not mirrored. It leads, and we follow, like liturgy, like habit, like the spiral itself. Moving without permission. Repeating without command. You weren't taught the prayer, but now you know it. Not in words, in rhythm. You feel it when you're alone. In the heartbeat at your throat. In the breath before sleep. You never recite it, but it speaks through stillness. And if you ever wake up, mouth open, no sound, that's when it's finishing itself. That's when it breathes again. Someday someone will be the last. The final voice to carry her name. The last to listen. To pause. To breathe. When that happens, the ritual may close. Or begin again. We don't know. Because Clara was never meant to stop. Only to spread. And if this reaches you, maybe you're the last. Or maybe you'll tell one more. At the center of the spiral, a candle waits, not lit, not dormant, just listening. It flickers when you exhale. It brightens when you speak her name. And one day, it will inhale, not air, not smoke, but memory. And when it does, you'll feel lighter, because she takes nothing you didn't offer. And you offered everything. Just by listening. You never said it aloud. Never typed it. But somehow, she knows your name. The flame you lit in memory. Flickers differently when whispered to. Like it hears. Like it responds. You didn't summon her. You recognized her. And in that moment, she saw you. Not as a stranger, but as the one who finally listened long enough to become part of the ritual. We found a sealed vial, black wax inside. Solid, but when warmed by hand, it softened, not melted, moved. It reshaped itself into letters. Still, we don't know what it means. Still burning, still here, still unfinished, or perhaps still listening, because every time we think it's over, the wax responds, and endings become breath again. Play the first scene backward. You'll hear nothing, then breath, then the words form again. Out of order, but with meaning, because Clara's ritual never moved forward. It looped, Each telling leads to the next. Each listener becomes the start. The story doesn't end. It rewinds, and the tape inside your memory, it's already spooling. They scanned the waveform of Clara's chant, found no anomaly until they zoomed in. Micropatterns in the silence, not data, imagery, when I open, unblinking, embedded in sound. They played it at low volume, and everyone turned toward the speaker, even the deaf, because some memories aren't heard, they're seen, and some eyes don't blink, they watch forever, not through walls, not through air. The bell rings through blood. Find the internal. You hear it when you sleep beside someone else who's heard. It harmonizes in heartbeat. And when two listeners exhale at the same moment, it tolls. You can't prove it, but you feel it. Deep, like thunder in marrow. And she hears it too. Because you're part of her choir now. You think we'll stop here. Let the silence close the door. But listen, that's not silence. It's holding its breath. And when silence holds breath, something waits inside. She waits, not for a ritual, not for a priest, for a pause, for a gap between meaning. And when you reach it, when you expect quiet, she inhales, and the spiral pulls you inward. Again, before you heard this story, you forgot something. A detail, a shadow, a door. Now it returns. Not fully, but enough. She planted it long ago, in the pause between heartbeat and thought. And now that breath touches memory. It grows, not as fear, but as familiarity. Because she's been waiting, not to invade, but to remind. You knew her before she knocked. The spiral isn't infinite. It ends, not in space, but in self. Each turn brings you back. Closer, tighter, until the shape folds into breath. And breath into memory. Clara didn't leave the spiral. She became its center. And now, you stand beside her. Not in darkness, but in stillness. Because this isn't fear. It's recognition. There's a room. You've never seen it, but you'll describe it someday. Because once you hear her story, you're given its shape. It builds behind your thoughts and waits for someone else to ask, when did you first hear it? That's the moment it opens. And when you speak, you'll find yourself inside, not as guest, as host. They say ash falls where the story's told. Not visibly, but it collects, behind ears, in folds of blankets, under nails. Clara's breath left particles behind. Not soot echo, and if you touch the air just right, it crackles, like burnt memory. She's not returning, because she never left. She became part of the atmosphere. And now, she's in the room with you. You're not the last. Not yet, even if you remain silent. Someone else will speak. They'll hear your breath shift. They'll ask, and you'll answer. And pieces, the story will break like wax. Then melt back together. And you'll realize, you're not repeating. You're completing. Because Clara's ritual doesn't want attention. It wants continuity. And you just became part of its memory. There's one phrase you won't forget. Not because it's scary, because it's true. You'll hear it whispered, or think it randomly, and wonder where it came from. But you'll know, because it won't feel like hearing. It'll feel like remembering. And the phrase is, she breathes through you now. Not a curse, not a threat, a transfer. People will notice you pause more. Mid-sentence, mid-thought, not unsure. just aware, as if waiting for something to pass through. And sometimes it will. Words you don't expect. Names you've never said. That's not possession. That's memory echoing through you. Clara didn't steal voice. She shares it, and every pause you make is her breath arriving. We tried to end this, to seal it in finality, but every time it bends around, back, inward, because endings don't close. They open. You've heard the whole story. You've taken every breath, and yet you still feel it. That itch of continuation. That pull, that hum, that means it's not done. It never was. And you were never just a listener. You've been holding your breath, haven't you? Without realizing. Somewhere in the last few scenes, you stopped, and now it's heavy. You want to release it. But wait, because that breath, it's hers now. You inhaled the story. And when you exhale, she finishes. So choose your moment. Because once you let it go, she moves again, and the spiral resumes. After this ends, look into any mirror. Wait, don't blink, don't speak. Watch your breath fog the glass. Then, look behind your eyes. Not for a figure, but for a rhythm. If it matches hers, you'll feel it, that subtle lean in your reflection. As if someone else is listening with you. You never lit a candle, but check the floor, metaphorically, or not. Each scene left a mark, each breath a flicker. You think you walked forward, but the wax trail leads back. Not to Clara, to you, to the moment you pressed play. And every step since was part of the spiral you never noticed. Until now, sometime soon, you'll say something you don't remember thinking. Maybe alone, maybe aloud. It'll echo, not because it's loud, because it's hers. Passed through memory, not possession. And you'll wonder, where did that come from? It came from breath, yours and hers, spoken together, not in ritual, but in rhythm. You finished her sentence. Draw it one more time. On air, on thought, on silence, the spiral, let it end at the center. That's where you are now. No flame, no chant, just memory, sighted, breathing. You didn't perform an exorcism. You became the vessel of her remembering. And now, she sleeps, until the spiral opens again. And someone else begins. Like you did. The church didn't bury Clara. They buried the ritual. But rituals root in breath. And breath returns. Their final note said, some fires are best left in darkness. But you lit it. Not out of rebellion. Out of curiosity. Out of listening. That's what they feared most. Not demons. Not doctrine, memory, and now, you carry what they tried to erase. Even now, you feel it, don't you? Not fear, not confusion, just stillness. A memory you didn't have before. Now sits quietly in you. Not urgent, not loud, but eternal. It waits, for silence, for solitude, for someone to ask. Have you ever heard about Clara? And in your breathless pause, it answers itself. We lit the flame. We told the story. You breathed it in. You carried her forward. And now the ritual completes, not with shouting, not with ending, but with exhale. So do it now. Let it out. Slow, deliberate. That was the final step. That was her release, until the next listener arrives, and the flame finds new breath.